Hi, if you are listening to this in bed, there is a reasonable chance that your body is tired, but your brain has apparently decided that this is an excellent time to hold a committee meeting. Perhaps about something that happened today or something that might happen tomorrow. A message somebody sent or a message somebody did not send. A conversation from 3 years ago that your brain has suddenly retrieved from the storage for absolutely no practical reason. Because 11:47 at night is when we need to revisit that slightly awkward thing we said at a dinner in 2019. Very useful. Thank you, brain. And maybe you have already tried telling yourself, stop thinking, let it go, don't overthink it. Which is one of those pieces of advice that sounds wonderful until you are actually overthinking. And telling someone who is overthinking to stop overthinking is like telling someone who can't sleep, have you tried sleeping? Technically correct, remarkably unhelpful. So tonight we are going to do something different. We are going to understand why the mind does this, why some thoughts seem to become sticky, why trying to force them away can actually make things worse, and most importantly, what you can actively do when you notice yourself caught in one of these loops. Nothing complicated, nothing that you need to memorize, and of course, nothing you need to accomplish tonight. You can just simply listen, and if something is useful, perhaps your mind will remember it tomorrow. And if you fall asleep halfway through, even better. There is no quiz at the end. So for now, let your head become a little heavier against the pillow. You don't have to take an enormous breath. Just breathe normally, whatever makes you comfortable. And let's begin with something important. So, overthinking does not mean you're bad at thinking. In fact, very often it means your brain is trying too hard to do something useful. Thinking solves problems. Overthinking repeatedly examines problems without getting much closer to a solution. That distinction sounds obvious, but when you are inside the loop, it can be surprisingly difficult to see. Imagine you have received a short email from your manager. It says, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Question mark. That's it. Four perfectly innocent words. Now there are several useful things you could think. What time is the meeting? Is there anything I should prepare? Was there a project we needed to discuss? Those thoughts may lead somewhere, but then perhaps the mind continues. Why did she say talk? Why didn't she say catch up? Would she normally put an exclamation mark? She didn't put an exclamation mark. That's interesting. Maybe she's unhappy. Did I make a mistake in Tuesday's report? Wait, I definitely made a mistake in Tuesday's report. Actually, was it Tuesday? And 15 minutes later, your manager has fired you. You have moved to another country. Your savings are gone. And somehow, you're living in a small cottage raising goats. All because somebody forgot an exclamation mark. That is the strange creativity of an anxious mind. Researchers often use the term repetitive negative thinking for this family of mental processes. It includes things such as worry and rumination. Repetitive thinking that is difficult to disengage from and tends to focus on negative possibilities or experiences. Worry and rumination overlap considerably, even though worry often leans toward the future and rumination often revisits the past. So, one of the first skills is learning to ask, am I solving something or am I circling something? You don't need to stop the thought immediately. Just recognize what kind of thinking is happening. Problem solving tends to produce a decision, an action, a new information, or an endpoint. But overthinking tends to produce another question and another and another. And it's a mental roundabout you keep driving. But somehow the same little flower bed keeps appearing outside the window. And if your mind is doing that tonight, you don't need to be annoyed with it. Just notice, oh, we are on the roundabout, and that's a useful information. A useful way of understanding overthinking is this: your brain is, among many other things, a prediction machine. It constantly uses previous experience to anticipate what might happen next. That ability is enormously useful. If dark clouds appear, you take an umbrella. If somebody behaved badly toward you, you may become more cautious around them. If an exam is coming, you prepare. Human beings survive partly because we can mentally travel into the future. But there is a problem. The brain does not only simulate pleasant possibilities, it is very interested in threats. And from a survival perspective, that makes sense. Imagine two ancient humans walking through a forest. One hears a movement in the bushes and thinks, probably nothing. The other thinks, it could be a tiger. Let's just check. If there actually is a tiger, the second person's slightly pessimistic imagination becomes quite useful. If there isn't, well, they have wasted 30 seconds. So, evolution tends to be rather forgiving of unnecessary caution when the alternative is becoming lunch. Of course, today the tiger may be a performance review, a relationship message, a mortgage payment, a difficult conversation, a career decision, or somebody replying with K, just the letter K, which may be one of the most psychologically powerful letters in the English language. The problem is not that the threat detection system exists. We need it. The problem comes when the mind begins treating uncertainty itself as danger. If I don't know what will happen, I need to keep thinking until I do. If I don't know what they meant, I need to analyze the conversation again. And if I don't know whether I made the right decision, I need to reconsider every possible alternative. And this creates a trap because many important parts of life do not provide certain things, like relationships don't, careers don't, parenting doesn't, health doesn't, big decisions don't. Even choosing what to order at a restaurant can sometimes become a 45-minute philosophical crisis for some of us. So, when we struggle to tolerate uncertainty, worry tends to increase. Research has repeatedly linked intolerance of uncertainty with excessive worry, which helps explain why the mind can keep generating possibilities even after useful planning has finished. So sometimes overthinking isn't really an attempt to find an answer, it's an attempt to find certainty. And those are not the same thing. This is another reason overthinking is difficult to stop. It often feels like you're doing something. Imagine tomorrow you have an important interview. You prepare your answers, useful. You check the address, useful. You choose your clothes, very useful. And then you imagine being asked a question you can answer. And then you imagine the interviewer's reaction. And then you imagine being rejected. And then you imagine explaining the rejection to your family. And then you wonder whether you choose the wrong career. You see, you are exhausted. But because the mind has been extremely busy, it can feel as though you have been preparing. The brain confuses mental activity with progress, but they are not always the same. You can spend an hour worrying about an interview without becoming one sentence more prepared for it. This is why one of the most useful questions for an overthinking mind is, what will be different after another 10 minutes of thinking about this? If the answer is I'll have a plan, good, think. If the answer is probably nothing, but perhaps I'll feel completely certain, you may have crossed from problem solving into rumination. Now imagine stirring sugar into tea. You stir several times, the sugar dissolves. The job is finished. If you keep stirring for another 30 minutes, the tea does not become 30 minutes sweeter. At some point, the useful work has already been done. Overthinking is often the mental equivalent of continuing to stir the tea. Now we come to one of my favorite strange things about the human brain. Try this for a moment. For the next 10 seconds, do not think about a white bear. Absolutely no white bears. Not a large one, not a small one. Definitely don't imagine a white bear walking through snow. And whatever you do, don't picture its nose. How did that go? This became a famous psychology experiment. Daniel Wegner and colleagues found that deliberately trying to suppress a thought could make it difficult to keep that thought out of awareness. The classic experiment used exactly this instruction. Don't think about a white bear. The reason is almost comically logical. To make sure you're not thinking about something, part of your mind must keep checking whether you're thinking about it. Don't think about the meeting. Am I thinking about the meeting? Oh, the meeting. Don't think about the meeting. There it is again. So the alternative is not necessarily get rid of this thought. Sometimes it's simply notice the thought without climbing inside it. There is a big difference between I am going to fail and I am noticing that my mind is telling me I might fail. The second sentence creates a tiny bit of distance, not denial, distance. You don't need to argue with the thought. You don't have to replace it with everything will be definitely be wonderful. Sometimes I find positive affirmations feel ridiculous because part of your brain is standing in the corner saying, "Really? Are we sure about that?" So instead, try something more believable. "My mind is predicting a bad outcome," or "I am having the thought that I made a mistake." Or simply, "There is the worry again." A thought can be present without requiring a meeting. You don't have to invite every thought into the conference room. Some can remain in reception. And since you are lying here, we can stop thinking about thinking for a moment. Feel where your body touches the bed, perhaps the back of your head, your shoulders, your back, your legs. You don't really need to relax them, just notice that something beneath you is holding your weight. Sometimes we spend the whole day holding everything ourselves, all the plans, the conversations, deadlines, people's expectations, our own expectations. But physically, right now, you don't have to hold yourself up. The bed has that job. Let it do it. You can breathe in and then breathe out. Whenever you're ready, we will continue. I have a few practical tools to share to challenge your overthinking. So, the first practical skill is almost disappointingly simple. Whenever you notice overthinking, name it what is happening. I am worrying. I am replaying that conversation. I am trying to predict. I am looking for certainty. And no judgment, not that I am ridiculous, not that why can't I control my brain, because now you have created a second problem. First, you're worried, and then I am worried that I'm too worried. And then why am I kind of person who worries about being worried? And congratulations, we have invented worry squared. So instead, oh, I'm looping. This helps because you are shifting attention from the content of the thought to the process. Rather than solving every sentence your brain produces, you notice the pattern. The content may change every day. Monday work, Tuesday money, Wednesday relationship, Thursday the thing you said to a cashier 8 years ago, but the process may be identical. Question, possibility, analysis, temporary reassurance, new question, more analysis. So once you recognize the pattern, you don't need a new strategy for every new topic. You can respond to the loop itself. Practical tool 2, asking, is there an action? Here is perhaps the most useful question you can ask. Is there something I can actually do about this? Let's take a real life example. You have sent someone an important message. 3 hours pass and no reply. Your brain begins, maybe they're upset. Maybe I sounded rude. Let me read the message again. Hmm. That full stop looks aggressive. Should I have used an emoji? Maybe the smiley face would have looked desperate. Maybe no emoji was better. Actually, was okay. Too short. At some point, you have conducted forensic analysis on punctuation. So ask, is there an action? If yes, take it. Maybe you genuinely realize you were unclear. Send one clarifying message. Done. But if there is nothing useful to do except wait, then more analysis is not action. The answer becomes there is currently nothing to do. And this is uncomfortable because it means you're losing that control. But that is often exactly the skill overthinking has prevented you from practicing, not knowing, and waiting anyway. For problems that do have an action, make the action very small. Not fix my career. Try tomorrow at 10 a.m. I will update one section of my resume. Not that sort out my finances overnight. Maybe tomorrow I will open the statement and list the three numbers I need. Not that I repair my entire relationship. Just try. Tomorrow I will ask if we can talk. The mind likes giant, abstract problems. Your nervous system generally does better with specific next steps. Now, the practical tool three, change why into what. One characteristic of rumination is that it tends to become abstract. Why am I always like this? Why does this keep happening? Why can't I get anything right? Why don't people understand me? These questions sound profound, but they can be traps because they have almost unlimited answers. So instead, try converting them. Instead of why am I terrible at meetings, ask what happened in today's meeting that I would do differently next time. Instead of why do relationships never work for me, ask what specifically upset me in that conversation. Instead of why am I so anxious, ask what is my mind predicting right now? You see, now the problem has edges. Researchers studying rumination have found that repetitive negative thinking can interfere with effective problem solving, which is one reason therapies often work on changing the process of thinking rather than endlessly analyzing the content. And there is something quite humane about this approach. You don't have to solve who you are every time something goes wrong. Sometimes you just had a bad Tuesday. Not everything needs to become your origin story. Practical tool 4, schedule your worrying. Now, this one sounds slightly absurd the first time you hear it. Instead of trying not to worry, make an appointment with your worry. Seriously, like perhaps between 6:30 and 6:50 tomorrow evening. If worries arise earlier, write them down and tell yourself, I will think about that during worry time. This is called worry postponement, and controlled research suggests that scheduling worry for a designated period can reduce the amount of worry spilling across the rest of the day. The beauty of it is that you're not saying this doesn't matter, you're saying it doesn't need my attention right now. Practical tool 5. Write unfinished things down before bed. There is another reason the mind may keep returning to thoughts at night. It doesn't want you to forget. Remember to email that person. Remember the appointment. Remember the bill. Remember to buy your toothpaste. Remember the presentation. So the mind is acting like an unpaid administrative assistant who has become slightly panicked. One surprisingly practical intervention is to externalize those unfinished tasks. And this is something that I practice myself. Practical tool 6. Separate facts from stories. Overthinking often begins with something real, but then the mind adds a story. Fact is, my friend hasn't replied today. Story is, they are annoyed with me. Fact is, I made an error at work. Story is, everyone now thinks I am incompetent. And to be fair, we have traveled a very long distance from the evidence. Try dividing your thoughts into two columns. What do I know and what am I imagining? This does not mean the imagined possibility is impossible. Maybe your friend really is irritated, but my friend hasn't replied and my friend no longer likes me are not the same piece of information. When the mind is anxious, possibilities can begin to feel like facts. So say, possible, not proven. That little phrase is useful. So possible, not proven, and then unless action is required, you can leave the case open. Life contains open cases. You don't have to solve every mystery before bedtime. Practical tool 7. Use the good enough decision. Some overthinking lives inside decisions. Should I take the job? Should I move to Dubai? Should I send the message? Should I buy this? Should I stay or should I leave? Sometimes the mind keeps collecting information because it believes one final piece of evidence will make the decision completely safe. But many meaningful decisions involve trade offs. There may not be one choice that is clearly correct. So try asking, do I have enough information to make a reasonable decision? Not a perfect decision, a reasonable decision. And then decide when that decision will be made. For smaller things, I will choose by 6. For bigger things, I will gather information until Friday and then decide Saturday morning. Otherwise, information gathering can quietly become anxiety management. You keep researching because researching postpones the discomfort of choosing, and at some point, you must exchange certainty for commitment, and that is adulthood, unfortunately. Practical tool 8. Interrupt thinking through the body. Sometimes the mind is too activated for another clever mental technique. You have been thinking for 40 minutes. You know you are overthinking. You have identified the pattern. You have labeled it. You have practically written a dissertation about it, and your brain says, wonderful, anyway, what if? At that point, change channels. So use your body. Maybe take a shower, walk for 10 minutes, stretch, fold your laundry, make tea, wash a dish, feel cold water on your hands, anything that gives attention to concrete sensory job. This is not avoiding the problem, it's recognizing that once thought becomes repetitive, more thought may not be antidote. Rumination and worry are associated with prolonged stress related activation rather than simply existing as neutral intellectual exercises. Your mind and body continuously influence one another. So sometimes we stop trying to convince the mind that everything is fine and simply give the nervous system evidence that in this moment nothing needs to be chased. And practical tool 9, and most important, stop trying to solve life in bed. Beds are unusual places. We associate them with rest, but many of us accidentally train them to become officers for unscheduled psychological meetings. You lie down, lights off, and the brain says, excellent, no distraction. Let's discuss your entire future. So create a rule. Important thinking happens outside the bed. If there is genuinely something you need to solve, sit somewhere else tomorrow and solve it deliberately. Use paper. Give it 20 minutes. Make a decision. But lying in the dark, repeating the same four possibilities, usually isn't giving the problem your best thinking. It is giving it your most tired thinking, which is perhaps not the consultant you want to hire. Your 1 a.m. brain can be very convincing, but it is also tired and emotionally amplified, and occasionally convinced that one slightly odd facial expression from another person has changed the course of human history. So, tomorrow's brain deserves a vote here. And the deeper skill, becoming more comfortable with not knowing. All of these strategies eventually point towards something larger. Learning to tolerate, I don't know. I don't know exactly what they think. I don't know whether tomorrow will go perfectly. I don't know whether I chose the absolute best option. I don't know whether this relationship will last forever. I don't know precisely where my career will be in 5 years. And somehow I can continue living. Overthinking often whispers, you may rest when you know, but peace cannot depend entirely on certainty. Because certainty is rare, a more useful sentence is, I know enough for tonight. Not everything will be definitely be okay. Just, I know enough for tonight. And if something needs handling tomorrow, tomorrow can handle it. Perhaps you can say that quietly now with me, that I know enough for tonight, and nothing more needs to be decided in this bed. And what if the thought keeps returning? It probably will sometimes, and this part matters. When a thought returns, that does not mean you failed. The mind learns through repetition. If you have spent years following every worrying thought, you're probably not going to hear one 30-minute audio and suddenly become a Zen. monk floating 3 inches above the mattress. And frankly, that would create several new practical problems. So the thought returns, you notice, there it is. No new argument, no disappointment. You just return maybe to your breathing, to your pillow, maybe to the sound of this voice. And then 5 minutes later, if there it is again, return. The practice isn't preventing thoughts from appearing. The practice is getting better at not automatically following them. Think of standing beside a road. Cars pass. You don't chase each car simply because it appeared. Likewise, thought passes. Some are loud, some are interesting, some are frankly terrible drivers. So you remain beside the road. Imagine just another real life thing. Imagine tomorrow evening you send someone a message. It matters to you. They don't reply. The old sequence might be check phone, read message, analyze message, check phone, open social media, see they were online. Now we have evidence, analyze evidence, ask friend what they think. Friend says they're probably just busy, temporary relief. And 10 minutes later, but what if they're not? Now imagine a different sequence. You notice the urge, you say, I'm trying to get answer. Is there anything useful to do? No, I have sent the message. So you put the phone down. You do feel uncomfortable. And this is the important part. You let yourself feel uncomfortable without fixing the discomfort through more analysis. And then 10 minutes pass. Maybe you're still uncomfortable. And then 20 minutes, perhaps less. And slowly, the brain learns something new. Uncertainty can exist, and I don't have to immediately solve. That learning is far more powerful than finding the perfect, reassuring thought. Because reassurance expires, tolerance grows. And now perhaps we can stop learning. We have listened long enough. If you have reached to this point, your mind may be quieter, or perhaps it isn't. Either way, nothing has gone wrong. You don't need to make sleep happen. Sleep is one of those things that becomes strangely shy when chased. So we won't chase it. Let the words become less important now. You don't need to remember the 9 techniques. Tomorrow maybe you will remember one, but that is enough. Perhaps you will remember, am I solving or circling? Or is there an action? Perhaps possible, not proven. Or simply, I know enough for tonight. You can close your eyes. Notice the darkness behind your eyelids. No need to picture anything, just darkness. Notice the weight of your head, the pillow underneath it, the blanket somewhere against your skin. There may still be thoughts, that's okay. Mind does not have to become empty before sleep. Thoughts can continue somewhere in the distance, like people talking quietly in another room. You don't need to hear every sentence. Maybe something unfinished comes to mind tomorrow. Maybe something embarrassing returns. It's already happened. Maybe the future arrives, but it isn't here yet. Tonight does not have to contain tomorrow. Tonight can be smaller than that. This room, this bed, your breathing. Your body already knows how to breathe while sleeping. It has been doing that without your supervision for a very long time. And now, if you would like, let your attention move slowly downward. Forehead, no need to smooth it, just notice it. Your eyes, your jaw, shoulders, hands, your free hands, nothing to type, nothing to fix, nothing to hold. Legs can become heavy, feet have nowhere to go. There will be time for useful thinking, there will be time for decisions, there will be time for conversations, there will even be time for little worrying. But it does not need to happen now. You have done enough today. You know enough for tonight. Rest now and hope you have a good night.